This is my publication day. Well, it's actually not my publication day, but it will be when you watch this. And I'm here with Gavin Ralph, who writes as GB Ralph. He writes the Milverton series, which is set in New Zealand. It's a Cosy Mystery series. And we're going to be chatting about our cast of characters, writing in fictional places, and anything else that comes along into the conversation. Gavin, do you want to have a little introduction to your series as well?
Sure. I pitched my Milverton Mysteries as featuring a chaotic cast of local busybodies, lots of delicious baked treats, demanding and disdainful ginger cat, a very slow burn romance with a rather appealing policeman, and of course murder. So yeah, the first one, Murder on Milverton Square. I released that in November last year, and the second one's coming out in October. Of course, he gets in trouble again, so that's why we're back for book 2.
I'm really excited about book 2 coming, because I obviously beta read for you for book 1, and I think I said to you at the time, I felt like this was like Cozy Mysteries coming back for a really youthful audience, and just like it was so much fun, and I really loved your first one, so I'm really looking forward to the second one. I'm also really looking forward to the fact that you've got audiobooks coming, which is super exciting.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. I have no idea on the timeline on that because I'm not in control of it, which is very unusual considering I'm used to being able to control most things when it comes to indie publishing. So having somebody else taking it over is exciting, but also a bit, I kind of have to at the moment sort of forget about it until things start moving, because it's a bit of a trad process and very slow.
Yeah, but that will be really exciting when that happens.
Yeah.
You, like me, have a fictional town. So I have my fictional town of Cuddy Ford and my Rowan McFarlane Mysteries. And I did that because when I was writing book 1, I wanted things to be in places that they weren't in real life. So I actually did start out using my town as it exists, Dunfermline. And then I realized that I actually wanted places that actually by and large used to be in Dunfermline but no longer exist because I've lived here all my life. And I was like, oh, if only the old bus stop was there, I could really use that. So in the end, I gave myself a fictional town so I could have free reign with what buildings was in it. What about, did you come at it from a similar point of view, or did you always know you wanted to use a fictional town?
Yeah, I think I like the limitations of using a real place, but at the same time they can be too limiting. So I like the freedoms of having a fictional town. But I think I took a similar approach where I've taken aspects of towns near where I live and near where Milverton is actually set, because it's set between a mountain range and a river, and where a gorge goes through the mountain range. So it's set on a real couple of farms that actually exist there. I've just sort of removed a nearby town and sort of plonked it there because I wanted it. I wanted a town that was in a place where there was lots of natural beauty, but also lots of dangers. So plenty of opportunities for people to be, I don't know, either getting in trouble by themselves or having people get them in trouble. Plenty of opportunities for murderers anyway. But for example, Milverton Square is loosely based on Manchester Square in a nearby town of Fielding. Harper House, which is my main character's the big estate that he inherits, that is based on a historic homestead where I live, and I often run past it on my running route, which is quite cool. And it's quite. I went in with very much my author research hat on one time, because they open it up a couple of times a year, but they'll have like this art trail where a bunch of artists will be showing their stuff in the room. So it was quite fun going through, looking at this house with a much more consciously with my sort of notes app on my phone open and getting a couple of pictures as I go around. But no, I I had a similar thing with the fictional town in that I wanted things to be where they were, and I didn't want to be stuck forcing myself to make something work if I didn't want it to. I mean, sometimes that can really lead to some really interesting creative choices, but also I was very conscious of people like, no, you can't turn right on Fitzherbert Street at the lights kind of thing, and I really didn't want to have to worry about getting research details like that right, because they're not interesting to me. I'd rather just get my characters moving, get them get them interacting, and the mystery ticking along. And I didn't want to be hamstrung by making sure that I had a tree in the right place in 1997 kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely, I think it was a similar situation to you where you've because this is Cuddy Ford, was it between Dunfermline and Kirkcaldy, you imagine?
Yeah, Kirkcaldy,
yeah.
That's right. So I've kind of squished it between two real places.
Yeah. I did a similar thing, but I sort of put mine across the river from an existing town, which I'm like, two towns wouldn't exist across the river from each other, so I've removed that other town. So I feel a bit bad, but it's okay. It's sort of in place of that other town.
Sometimes I think because of the nature of the county and things when I'm writing, so Rowan often goes out of Cuddy Ford to do things. Like she was very much in Cuddy Ford in book 1, but in subsequent books it's not been quite as centralized. So I've had to send it to some real places, which means I've really had to think about where my fictional town is and how it interlinks with all the other places. But because it's fictional and I've never really pinned it down, I can be fairly vague with where it is, and I quite like that.
Yeah, same. I have a couple of very loose maps that I've drawn. Well, basically just screenshots of Google Maps zoomed right out, and I've drawn a circle where the town is kind of thing, because it basically has, I've got a couple of main roads that come into it, and I've pulled the rail line from one side of a river to the other side so that it cuts through the middle of town. But otherwise, I haven't pinned down any particular locations, and I do try to keep it as consistent as possible. But I don't go into great detail about, and then our characters turn left and walked 100 meters and because it's I mean, it doesn't add to the story, and I get bored writing it, so I'm sure the readers will get bored reading it.
For sure, I agree. I think that I would find that difficult to get stuck in the constraints of directionality. I mean, sometimes I'll say things like, it will take 20 minutes for it to get from here to there. And when my husband reads it, he'll be like, it wouldn't take 20 minutes. It would take this length of time, even not measuring for where you are. So sometimes I have to think about that, and I think, actually, would it? Like, what's the distance of things? But yeah, I like it. I like the freedom it gives you. I was just going to say, I'm not sure if I mentioned for anybody watching doesn't know that you're in New Zealand. So
and my books are set here as well, and which I was quite a little concerned about when I was first publishing, because I'm like, it's not, in this sort of the main sort of, well, if we're not using fictional towns, if we're using real towns, it is quite exciting to see, oh yes, I've been there, I recognize that spot the character's in. So I think there's definitely benefits to having a story set in a real place, which is really cool. But I was like, I don't know, because a lot of my readers are British or American, Irish, Canadian, and basically a lot of people a long way away from New Zealand. And so I'm like, I don't know how well a lot of things travel. Like, a lot of things do travel well, and there's some things where I haven't really got stuck into the Kiwiisms, because early readers were like, what is this, Gavin? What are you talking about?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because book 4 that's coming out on the 11th, there are some really broadly Fife characters in that book, and there's a proper way that, like, a Fife dialect, and I was really conscious that I wanted to keep it authentic and true to how they would sound, but also at the same time, I could only pepper those things in. Otherwise, I'd end up with sentences that people would struggle to read because of the way it would be written in kind of like proper Scots language. So I've got some Disneys and some Fae, and sort of, you know, where are you Fae, and sort of where you're from, and some little bits which I think in the context of the sentence people will understand completely no matter where you're from. But I always think it's the weirdest things that don't travel. And because you beta read for me, sometimes you'll be like, what's this? And I'll be like, oh God, no comprehension outside my own little bubble that people wouldn't know what that was.
Yeah. But I think
that's
it's the being with yours being set in Scotland and mine being set in New Zealand. I think a lot of the appeal is the location for readers that aren't from those locations. So I think readers can really enjoy spending time in these places and seeing these little quirks, and the examples that you've given in context, they totally make sense because there's very few other words that could be put into that place, and it makes sense and it doesn't pull you out, and you just keep reading and it's happy days. But it's so I think we're in danger of trying to make it too widely understandable, and it sort of loses the appeal to a lot of people. So I try to just write it as I want it, and then see what comes back from early readers and say, like, is there anything that's standing out, or do I need to chuck a couple of extra words earlier in the paragraph maybe to sort of make it make sense? And hopefully the balance is about right, and I'm not teaching everyone how to suck eggs, but at the same time it's not totally going over people's heads and they're like, what are they talking about?
I think that so I've now taken to adding a little bit in my note at the front. So my author note for book 4 is a bit longer than usual because I explain what waffle is. I explain a little bit about our road system because it is relevant to the story, and because it makes sense to me, and I just think that everybody does that. I didn't really take a wee step back and do that, so I've got a little bit more of a explanation in the front of my books, which is fun. But I think, I was gonna say, like, when you're talking about people, the way people speak and things, that makes me think of our extended cast, which I think is so important in both our books. You were talking about, like, your the cat, and even like pets. Although I just realized that my books are really devoid of pets, which I don't know what that says about me. But they're really devoid of pets. You've got the cat, and I think as well, you've got some of your settings like the library and stuff like that. Why did you pick the people in your cast? How did they develop organically, or as you wrote the story, or did you always know that you were going to have these key players?
I always knew that, because my sleuth, he's not doing it in any sort of professional capacity like Rowan is, and so he's fallen into it, and so the people that happen to be around, he's sort of leaning on them a bit for information, because he's new to Milverton, he knows nothing about the place, and so a couple of his key support crew are the woman at the coffee shop who loves a chat, so she's an excellent source of gossip and just information, and then his friend who he makes at the visitor center, which is in the foyer to the library, and she's a bit bored in the visitor center because there's not that many people coming in, and so she sort of drags him in for a chat. She's like, oh, new face, but she's been a resident in Milverton for many years, and so she's effectively his sidekick. And but they're great because I think the story would get really boring if we spent the entire time in our main characters' heads, but to have somebody else to have a conversation with, and they can bounce some ideas off, and you can get a really good idea of what they're thinking, and at the same time get the thoughts of another character, which is much more interesting to read. But the cat, my books definitely think they've all featured cats so far. Not anything against dogs, but cats are less, they're sort of lower maintenance, so you can let them go off screen for a while and they can look after themselves, whereas dogs, I think, need more attention. But I had the cat he inherits this house, and it comes with a cat which he didn't know at the time, and so it's only him in the house and this cat. So the cat sort of almost serves as a person to talk to again. So he's not just talking to himself, and I have great fun giving Keith the cat a bit of attitude as well, which I don't know. I don't know. It's very much it's a common element in cozy mysteries is to have some kind of pet involved, and so I was like, I'm absolutely going to be using that, and have had great fun.
Yeah.
Whereas with your support crew, they're a bit more. You've got Rowan's daughter, and
Yeah.
you've also got some people who have much more use professionally, as in she's got George with the police, and then Sonia forensics.
Yeah, pathologist.
Yeah. Yes. And so she can, and I think I really enjoy Rowan, trying to get information out of them when really she knows she has no right to this information because she's not involved in the official investigation. So it's all about her trying to, I don't know, either guilt them into it or trading favors or this other kind of thing. So I think it makes it really interesting because it's not just maybe cops who can just tell their colleagues to do things or ask their colleagues or their subordinates to do things. So she has to be very creative in how she gets her information, which is just as much fun as finding out the information is how is she going to find out this information? And I think, do you think
I think
that helps?
she starts off with not very good success, because obviously she's really quite emotionally charged in book one. But you're right, and I love having a main character who's not in the police, because I love the fact that there's not all the red tape around it, and she's no one really to answer to. I mean, she really, really annoys George, obviously, and that's been really fun to watch, to write their relationship growing, as well, because that was like both Sonia and George were both really quite prickly relationships to begin with. So I kind of enjoyed writing that progression in that, to the point that now they're friends and they can have that bit of banter with each other, where George is still properly exasperated with her, but at the same time they've kind of learned each other's value in an investigation, which is lovely.
And they can respect each other, and so she knows that, well, George knows that she's not going to misuse the information, say. That was one thing which I quite liked with your latest book when I was beta reading, is because I think you were quite concerned about taking her away from home and taking to a different location, especially when she's so established in her town, and then taking to a new place. But I really quite enjoyed how she's been taken away from much of her support crew, and so she's having to deal with these issues which she hasn't dealt with in a long time, where she has to deal with a police force who aren't receptive to this person poking her nose in. So I think that makes it, for a really interesting, really interesting story, really interesting mystery, that she has to work harder in certain areas just to get the same kind of information that she might have been more easily been able to pick up because she's built these relationships. Yeah,
definitely. I think as well, part of the thing I liked about that, because that's actually not this book, but the next book, that's book 5. But when I did that, and I really felt that she needed to come out of where she was. But when I did that, and I started to have that interaction with other police officers, I wanted to almost kind of show that growth from the first kind of interaction she had with George, but still that she still really hasn't developed those excellent social skills. Like, she's still really lead-footed when she just comes to watch with her, and she struggles with building those new relationships with authority figures. So she has grown massively with the people that are in her little bubble, but when it came to writing book 5 and to give her that different thing, I wanted her to still not quite be there, still like kind of like have all of that hostility, which was fun. But yeah,
I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of things.
I know, but no, I think it's because I have been dragging my heels a little bit. I just life kind of got my last year of life kind of got really mad with my dad passing and then having my hip replaced. The two are not related. But so all of my time frames just went properly out the window last year, which is the joy of self-publishing, of course, is you can go, you know what, this isn't going to work for me now. So I'm kind of on this lag where people are like, which book is this? Especially people who beta read from me like yourself, but this is like the one before that. But this is the only one with pets in it, actually. It's got 2 little Scotty dogs in it, and they're in it because I have a close friend, Annalie, whose little dogs, they're Jock and Wallace, they're named after them, they passed. And I promised her, I said, at some point, I'll memorialize them in a book. And we kind of like just had this sort of like laugh. I did that. So that was the book. I thought this is the one to do it. So yes, this is the only one with pets, and they are passing through. They're not permanent fixtures. But I don't think any pet would stay alive with Rowan, to be honest. I sometimes think that she and Alana only survive because of Alana making sure, you know, that there's food in the fridge and that things happen, which is ironic.
Which is part of the fun as well. Again, it's not just supporting in an investigation kind of way, but as in making sure that she's going to, I don't know, get up or go to the meeting, or she's not going to be like, oh, I haven't eaten in the last day or two.
Yeah. Or just to make sure that she comes home and, you know, someone going, where are you? When you
I do enjoy that. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I do enjoy that sort of a bit of a role reversal with Rowan and Alana, where Alana is basically not mothering, but making sure she's like, have you eaten? Who are you going out with? When will you be home? How will you get home? And I think, yeah, that's great fun.
I think
I'm glad I know what book we're talking about now. I do now, especially now that you mentioned the dogs, because obviously they, when I read book 4, I was like, oh yes, I was like, oh, this is fun. So I mean, that was honestly, people ask me questions about my books, and I'm like, you have read it much more recently than me. I wrote it years ago, and obviously I spent a long time with them, but I've also spent a lot of time with other characters since then. So all of these things are sort of have been archived a little bit in my mind. And so, okay, I'm glad I'm thinking about the right book now.
I think it's harder for you though, because you write more than one genre. So that's like, I don't think I could do that. Like I have to stay firmly in a criminal world to keep me grounded. When you were writing book 2, did you enjoy that development of your characters? And because obviously in book 1, all the relationships are really new and people like they don't know each other well. So he hasn't got any established like he makes those friends as he's going along. So like how have those relationships developed in book 2?
I've really enjoyed being able to, because yeah, as you say, when you're in book 1, you're sort of having to build everything up, and it can feel, to me anyway, it can feel a bit slow because everything's new, so you have to build them all up together. Whereas now I've got, for example, I've got my main character, I've got my cop, and I've got my Lynn at the coffee shop, and I've got Mabel at the visitor center, and I'm like, okay, and Keith the cat, of course. I mean, they're all set. We sort of know what they're like, and so now I can spend more time or get more quickly into things and spend more time with the new characters or the very much the secondary characters for this book, but at the same time still spending a little bit of time sort of reintroducing them, because I'm writing these very much in a way where I hope that they can be picked up at any point, as opposed to needing to read them from book 1.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think to get this overall character progression through the books, you'd have to read them from the start to end. But I do want readers to be able to pick up book 2 or eventually book 3 and read it and enjoy the mystery on its own. And yes, but I've really enjoyed building my main characters through this book, because I I want them to grow, but at the same time, the first book I think happened over a week or 2 weeks, and same case with the second book. So there's very little time going on, but at the same time, it's almost like a reward for long-time readers is seeing these characters build, and it keeps the interest for me. And as I say, with the very slow burn romance with the cop, I mean, I'm glad I put that in the blurb, because I had a few reviews that says yes, the romance is very slow burn, but it's not a romance book. It's just is a thing that's happening in the background, and I'm having great fun with it. But yeah,
I I actually love that of your book, is that slow burn, because it's there, but it's almost like constantly almost there but not, and then something will happen and set it back, and you'll be like, oh. And it's like those moments where you can kind of cringe together and kind of go, oh no, why did you do that? Like,
yeah,
how could you be, you know, like the moment he comes into the coffee shop, the moment you put that food in your mouth, and like, so you have all those moments, and but then you get these like really nice bits where he's really concerned about like Aston's well-being, and so that it's like, I just think
something
that's
happened.
kind of not. And if that was too quick, I think it would take over and make it too romancy. It make it romance with a touch of crime, but because it's the other way, I think it's nice. It's
Yeah.
also that kind of thing which I think anchors him to this new life.
Mm. Which will be the Milverton itself was almost a character in its own right, because it's such a big part of the story. And
Yeah,
so I want that his relationship with the town to develop, because he's been pulled away from his job and his life in the big city, and in his mind, at least initially, he'll be up for a day or two and then he'll be back to his life. He'll sort this out and he'll go back. But obviously murders happen and he gets caught there, and then he finds that maybe he doesn't want to go back so quickly. But I also I'm also conscious of the fact that these books from start to finish happen in like a week. So
yeah,
otherwise, if they're suddenly falling head over heels for each other, and he's like, yes, I'm going to uproot my entire life, move to this town which I've never had any intention of going to before, and I'm going to fall in love in a week. It doesn't ring true to me. I'm not about the sort of insta love kind of thing. So in my mind, it is very slow burn, but because it takes the entire book for anything to happen. But really,
yeah.
it's only been a week.
Yeah, I love that though, because I think there were times when I thought, oh, I really relate to that feeling of that like job in the city type of, and then this thing that forces you to go and step out of your daily grind, um, and do something differently. I kind of just, there were so many bits in Milton Square that I was like, oh, I totally, I can really relate to how he's feeling about these things. And
Yeah,
even that part where his sort of city friends are a bit like, what are you doing, like,
yeah,
who
yeah,
are you
yeah,
now? Like, I
yeah,
just like all of those things coming together. So that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to read your book too, is to see where that takes him. And like, I've been excited for book 2 since I finished beta reading book 1. And I was like, I can't wait. This is going to be brilliant. So yeah, you've kept me waiting a really long time, which is rude.
I know. One of the early reviews was sort of saying, oh, I really enjoyed it, but now it looks like I have to wait like 10 months for the next one to come out. And I was like, I have to write it. Um, maybe I'll figure out a way to do things more quickly. So I don't know how some authors manage it faster. Maybe yeah.
And
One day, maybe.
I am upset with the same quandary, is that I think that I should be able to write quicker than I can. And I've still, even a couple of years on from publishing book one, still haven't figured out how that works. I had such great like plans. I was like, I'm going to publish 4 books a year. It's going to be dandy. And that did not happen.
I'm just like, you publish some books and you're like, yes, I can do this, and I must know what I'm doing now. And then when you come to having, you're like, okay, I'm going to write the next book now. I mean, when I came to write book 2, I'm like, how do I write a book? Where do I start? Because it is quite iterative, and it's not just you start at the start and then you go through. It's sort of like, oh, I do this. Oh, that's right, I did that, and then I will come up with a process one day. One day.
Yeah, I don't know.
But,
I see people put out like a lot of books, and I think, God, that just how do you physically get the time to write that many words, and then go through that process? And kudos to them for being able to do it, but I'm not sure that I'll ever be able to actually write that quickly.
Yeah.
And get from, it's not just the writing part, though, it's the getting from the A to the B. Yeah,
which I enjoy all the. It's one of the things I like about indie publishing is that it's not just the writing. It is you're at least doing the first go of all the rounds of edits, and you're the marketing department, and you're publishing. And so if you're not doing something yourself, then you are briefing someone to help you with it.
Yeah.
And I enjoy all stages of the process. So at the same time, I'm not desperate to get back to writing that first draft again, because I'm enjoying editing and all the various stages of editing, and then talking to people about the books and getting them printed and all this sort of stuff, which is great fun.
Do you do the whole sniff the book when they arrive?
I feel like
book sniffer?
I feel like we have to now, don't we? Right? Isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's a necessity. It's a rite of passage when the book comes. It's a requirement that you sniff it.
Yeah. Because I mean, you've seen it on screens. I've sent it to my Kindle to see how it looks even before it's published. So having the paperbacks are something different that you haven't been able to produce yourself. And you're like, oh. So yes, obviously a sniff is part of the process.
Necessary. It's funny because obviously you're talking about being all the departments, and so obviously you are the person who does the final sign off with all of the covers and all of the rest of it. And I last year made a decision to get my covers done by Get Covers, and they do a great job. And I think this is quite funny, because I really should have noticed this, and I think this just epitomizes the fact that I can have absolute laser attention to detail on one thing and then completely no attention to detail on another thing. So I have my prequel novella, right, Discarded. This has been on sale for a while, right, and I put it in paperback last year because a few people asked me to, and it was only this week when I was sorting things out that I realized that the blurb on the back is the wrong blurb. It's not the blurb on the for this book. It's a blurb for Jack in a Box. And I was like, how did that happen? So I went back to my Get Covers profile, and I was like, did I give them the wrong blurb? Which was entirely possible, by the way, that I gave them the wrong blurb just because. But I hadn't, and I was like, oh my God. So I messaged them, and they were like, oh, we're really sorry. And they fixed it really quickly. So I'm not even remotely upset about it. I actually think it's quite funny. But like, so I can be like, I love this cover. I was like, oh, this cover's great. I love the phone box. There's so much I love about this cover. All on the detail of that part. And I probably had like 2 or 3 back and forths to get it perfect. But when they sent me the full thing with the blurb on the back, did I read it? No. I just went, yeah, cool.
You can see something so many times that you just can't see it anymore. Or you don't think to check. Honestly, the number of sort of workflow checklist documents I have, because otherwise I just stress that I haven't covered every base and checked everything. And so but I don't even think that checking the blurb is on my checklist. Maybe I should add it.
Yeah, so that to me was just one of those things that I was like, that's fine. I've maybe got 5 or 6 that I had just like in my stash of all the books. and that's fine. I will use those at some point, and it'll be a funny story to tell. But yeah,
Oh,
I just
that'll be the collector's items one day. They'll be
yeah.
like, this was the ones. These are the ones with the stuffed up blurb on the back.
And I wonder, right, because I mean, I sell much more in Kindle and on KU. My paperback sales is relatively a small percentage, so there's not masses of those paperbacks out in the world. But I wonder, because the blurb is all right on Amazon, so I wonder if anybody who has one of those books has ever turned on and read the blurb and thought, that is not what this book is about. I'm so confused. Or if there are now people watching this going, I have that book, and I still didn't clock that blurb was wrong. And I'm sure that these are the things you're not supposed to talk about. There's both things like you like remain, stoically silent about because there was a mistake. But I think things like that are funny. So
They are. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like I've gotten a lot. When I first started, I would get very stressed about that. Whereas I think now I'd be much more serene about how silly the whole situation was, and okay, let's fix this. And I mean, it's not great, but also at the same time, it is a fun anecdote.
yeah, I would say if it was one of my main novels, but I think because it's a novella and because I know that I've probably sold such a small amount of paperbacks in that format of that book, then I'm not particularly bothered about it. But I bet there are people who will have that book and they'll now be going, does it have the wrong paperback? Yeah.
It wasn't the intention when you wrote that, was it, to necessarily release it in print? It was
no,
because it's very much an intermediate story. Is it the prequel?
it's a prequel that I wrote it.
Yeah.
So I wrote it after I wrote Jack in the Box and Sally in the Woods, and then I wrote the prequel. And I really actually don't remember why I wrote the prequel. That's really bad. And then I thought I'll release this on Kindle and that'll be fine. And then people said to me, but I really want the paperback. And I was really hesitant about doing the paperback just on cost basis because I know it's not a very long book. And so
because you're going to have to charge the reader quite a lot, because there's a bit to be able to have the binding in a minimum number of pages. It costs, and it's hard to justify it to yourself. And I'm like,
yeah,
readers are going to think we're taking them for a ride, but really this is the least that we can charge for it.
So it charges at $3.99 for paperback, which was like the kind of point which I needed it to be at to make it viable to do. But like I say, actually, although people ask me for it, I sell very few of them. And as I've got Bloody Snow as well, which is also a novella, I might do another couple of novellas and then put them in together as one paperback, which I think might supersede the Discarded by Itself. So that's potentially my plan. I'm making no promises right now.
But then by the time if you've collated a few of these novellas potentially together, then it's effectively will be the size of one of your novels, wouldn't it be?
Yeah. I was thinking probably about either 3 or 4 novellas would make a decent sized novel sized book. So that's probably what I'll do at some point in 2024, because it's definitely not on my calendar for 2023. There's already way more than I actually think I can achieve on my to-do list for 2023.
Yeah, we're eternally optimistic, Angela, about the things and the time that we'll have to finish things.
For
honestly,
sure.
the second book, I thought, it'll be no trouble. But the amount of editing that has gone into this book, I am, as of hopefully today, maybe tomorrow, I will have finished the second draft. And so I'm feeling much more book shaped now. But yeah, I'm still very conscious of it. There have been a lot of work to go to make it.
You did something which I thought was half mad, half brave, which was you put out book 1 and then you were like, here's the book 2, and you made it really public. And I was like, whoa, you really like that's kind of like deadline situations which I don't deal with. Which is probably why I don't publish many books. So I thought that was really brave. And I'm curious, are you planning on doing a similar thing for book 3? Are you just going to be like, here it is, it's definitely coming?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am planning to do that. I do not at this point have any idea what book 3 will be about, or what it will be called, or anything. But I mean, prior to book 1 coming out, I decided that at the end of book 1, sorry, I wanted to say book 2 is coming, because I think you've got the benefit of having a couple of novellas and 3 books out, 4 almost. And so when readers are on Amazon, they're like, yes, there's a whole lot of stories here, so I'm quite happy to invest my time in it, because I know that we're going to be able to spend, if I enjoy my time with Rowan, then I'm going to get to spend more time. And so I think there's a lot of reassurance for readers in that point, that it's not just going to be one book. You get to really enjoy the characters and the place, and then be like, oh, that was it. Which I mean, I enjoy, I love a standalone, but sometimes you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be a series. So I wanted to reassure people that are like, yes, you can start with book 1, because book 2 will come. And that was a decision that I made a week before book 1 came out. And a week before, I needed to have everything locked in. And so I'm like, I need to get a cover sorted. I need to get a title. I need to have a clue about what this plot's going to be about. So trying to write a blurb, like at least a placeholder blurb, for something which I have not written at all, was quite stressful. But I do enjoy a deadline. I mean, I feel like it can help motivate me to get the job done, and so it has. And I think the other good thing about was that when readers got to the end of book 1 and they saw there was book 2, then they can pre-order it if they wanted to. So they will get an email from Amazon, even if they don't join my mailing list, which they should, because that has all the information. But if they don't want to, then they can just pre-order the book, and it will magically appear on their Kindle one day, and they're like, oh yes, I really enjoyed book 1, so I'm going to read book 2 now. And so I'm hoping to do is be more organized about it this time, and at least have book 3 outlined, so I can have even more confidence that yes, this is going to happen. And because that is the advice that I've received since doing this, is, oh yes, I only ever put pre-orders up when I think I had the first draft of a book done, and I'm like, oh, I was so much further behind that point, but I'm catching up.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about self-publishing is we all do it differently. So I have been trying to get to this point with this book for so long that it's just been like everything has taken so long. So when I was done, I was like, I'll do a pre-order with the 11th of August, it'll come out. And it was just a random time frame. And I feel like that makes me sound like I'm quite a chaotic person, and potentially I am. But I think that trying to work everything around my life has led me to believe that I would be much like Douglas Adams was with deadlines. It's like I let it stand as they whoosh past my head. And I don't want, I'm really conscious of saying I'll do something and then something happening and it not, I'm not meeting that reader expectation. And so I think from my point of view, I like to be much further down the line before I even think about pre-order. And I could have done it much sooner with this book, because I had the cover and I had the blurb, and I could have done pre-order, and I could have kind of just given myself a decent time frame. But I probably wouldn't have given myself a decent time frame. I'd probably done it too soon, and I'd been panicking. But yeah, maybe with book 5, I'll do a longer pre-order window.
Yeah.
No problem.
I mean, my setting my release date was basically it was lined up around the fact that Amazon limits the pre-order period to 12 months from when you set it up. So I was like, okay, I'm setting this up a week before the release of book 1, and to line it up with a day that doesn't fall, I think it was going to fall on a public holiday or my birthday or something. I was like, well, I can't have that. And so I put it in a like midweek or on the weekend or something where it would be, I'm like, okay, I can make sure on release day that I'm fully attentive. So it's effectively 11 months and 2 or 3 weeks from when I set it up. And I was like, just the longest period, because I think, well, my understanding is that you can release things earlier without penalty, but if you want to delay your release date, then Amazon,
Upset.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think you can push it out once for like a month, but otherwise they're like, I mean, their whole thing is they want the customer service reader experience to be, they don't want authors to be able to take readers for a ride, and they're like, no, this is locked in. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all for it. And I thought, yes, this is the longest amount of period that I can have, so I'm like, I can do this.
It was funny you talk about not being on your birthday, because Sally in the Woods, I made this mistake, and I don't know why I really don't know why I thought this would be a good idea. But Sally in the Woods came out on my birthday, and I deliberately did that in 2021. But I was on holiday, and I was on holiday in the north of Scotland in my camper van, which meant that periodically I'd have to stop places where there was like enough signal so I could log on and I could do some social media posts. So throughout my whole birthday, I was like interspersed with doing social media, and I was like, this was a terrible idea. I am never doing this again. So with book 4, I was like, part of me was like, oh, do it on the anniversary of book 2. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this on my birthday again. Absolutely not. So it's the 11th of August, because I was like, oh, that's grand. I always work from home on a Friday. And then I released it, and then the next game day, my boss was like, oh, there's this meeting happening on Friday. Could you be in the office on the 11th of August? And I was like, oh my God, of course, yes. I'll be in the office. It'll be fine. So now I'm just going to have to like sneak away and do like, actually my work is really flexible, so they're lovely, but I'm just going to have to like find little breaks to kind of do bits and pieces, which will be fine. I might take my phone on a wee tour of the graveyard I walk around at
Yeah,
time as well.
cool. Because I mean, there's so much you can prepare in advance, but there's still, takes a bit of time to, if you haven't been able to schedule it or whatever, or just, yeah. The funny thing about being in New Zealand is that it's right by the dateline, and so everybody, I'm on release day many hours before any other countries are on release day, and so I'm sitting here like, okay, cool, okay, it's now available in Australia, and then I'm like, okay, and then wait, and it's like, and it's not till like lunchtime, that, because we're about 12 hours off the UK, depending on daylight savings. So sometimes 11, sometimes 13, but about 12. So I'm like, okay, lunchtime, it goes live in the UK, but still, everyone's in bed, still for another 7 or 8 hours kind of thing, from midnight. And then same again in the States. It's not till like dinner time that it's midnight and it's released to the States. So it's, by the time I'm in bed, I'm like, okay, it's release day in New Zealand, but it hasn't really been released anywhere. So for me, release day is kind of the day after the date in the calendar.
That, isn't it? Because I think like sometimes I'll get like kind of mediocre sales during the day, and then all of a sudden this period in the evening my sales will go up, and I'll be like, because I get really good readership in Australia, which I think probably covers the New Zealand part of Amazon as well, and the States, so I get really good readership on both those, but all of that tends to happen in the evening. So sometimes I've seen me go to bed thinking, God, today was a poor day, that's a bit rubbish, and I get up in the morning and I check and I'm like, oh, okay, well, thank you, Australia or New Zealand. That's where those sales have for sure happened. But yeah, so
I can't look at dates. Well, I definitely can't look at any kind of information from today. And like, if people are buying my book until 7 p.m, about 7 p.m. tonight, it will still be getting registered. Like in the States, people buying from the States, it'll still be getting registered as yesterday's sales or reads. And so I never see information for today kind of thing. So it's always
it took me a while to figure that out, because there were sometimes I would go and I'd like although I'm trying now, I have a day job that I need to go to, I try and go to bed at a decent time, but I would sometimes be up after midnight, and I would be like, oh, okay, that's my sales for that day, they are what they are. And then the next day I go back and check, and I'd be like, hold on a sec, you didn't say that yesterday. And then I was like, oh, you know what, this is a time zone thing. It was still yesterday in other places.
Yeah.
Which is always quite nice. But
Yeah.
but it's a bit of a weird one to get used to. Do you routinely look at your sales every day, or are you more chilled about it?
At around release time, I definitely do. But I definitely think I've gotten much more chill about it. And sometimes I feel very proud of myself. I'm like, I have gone days without checking any of this information. And I'm like, but no, if I'm doing any kind of, if it's release day or I'm doing any kind of promotion, then I am on there all the time. It's a tab that's open on the browser. And I'm like, oh yes, I'll go have a little check.
I just moved my mobile phone in case you wondered. That wasn't a ghost pass here. I just moved my mobile phone. As I did that, turned my camera, the torch on, so you saw this little white light pass across my face. That was very rude. But yeah, no, that I think release day is quite exciting though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think your sales and things like that. I think it's quite you're kind of looking for your place on the charts, and one day it's going to be bestseller.
That's right. We'll be top of the charts, won't we, Angela? All of our books.
Yeah.
Top of the mystery section.
Every time. Absolutely. For sure. So do you not have a title for book 3 yet?
I haven't allowed myself to think about it, because if I do, then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And because I've got notes all through the notes app on my phone, and a document that is just basically Milverton Mysteries sequel plot point ideas. And anytime I come up with any kind of thing, it just gets thrown in the document, because then I won't think about it and I won't worry that I'll forget about it. And so I will be going through all those notes and figuring out what step I want to take next. And a lot of it sort of comes from knowing where I sort of want my character to be by the end of the 3rd book. Like, how committed will he be to Milverton? Will any kind of relationship have progressed? What's he doing about the estate? Is he committing to turn it into a B&B? Or is he committing to fixing it up to put it in good stead to sell to developers or whatever? It's sort of like, I think I have a lot of that overarching series, the sort of subplots the sort of background story in my mind. And then before I even think about the potential, obviously it's getting increasingly ridiculous, the number of murders that are happening in this very small town, and it's only going to get more so. But no, so I have no idea who's going to get murdered, why they're going to get murdered, or what's going to happen. But I do have ideas about making sure my characters don't just stay static through the series, and they do build through book after book, yet still have the mysteries be self-contained and enjoyable in their own right. So do you have, not that you have to tell us because it'll be a big spoiler, but do you have plans for your characters and where they go, or is it kind of built each book and you leave the book to tell you where you think your characters are going?
I am a complete pantser, so I have a general idea. I have a theme, maybe somebody dies in a certain way or something happens. I have some kind of like points that I think I want to include, and then that's as good as I've got to when I sit down and write. So there are some character arcs which are following just a natural progression. So Alana goes to university, which leaves Rowan by herself in the house. I create relationships with other characters. So a mild spoiler alert, George is getting engaged to somebody else. And I did that deliberately because people asked me, oh, what are George and Rowan ever going to get together? And I was like, no, absolutely not. And so I'm marrying him off to somebody else deliberately. So there are things like that I kind of know, but they're not necessarily huge things. They're just bits and pieces. So for me, it's just like I start the book and I see where that takes me and how those relationships develop. And sometimes I'll chuck in a new character without really any intention of them being much more than a transient character. And by the time I get to the end, I'm like, oh, actually, they're pretty good. I could see them moving in. And sometimes I put in a character and it doesn't really work out. And so I kind of just like fade them back out. And they maybe have a bigger piece. And then I fade them back out again. But no, I have ideas. And I think as long as I have ideas for Rowan, then I'll keep writing the books. And when I stop having the ideas or they feel like I'm circling back on myself, then I'll maybe take a break, or stop. I don't, and people always say to me, well, how many books are you going to write? And I'm always like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how many books I'm going to write, because it's all really dependent on what ideas happen and how long I think that Rowan would continue, getting into fist fights with grown men and stuff like that, and how long she wants to do it. But I don't really have a retirement plan for her, and I don't particularly want to kill her off. So I think that unless I can kind of like find a way for her to retire gracefully and still be happy, I'm not sure if she'll just be like, crime fighting in her 60s.
Or are we going to have an Alana doing, once she's got a degree, is there going to be a spin-off series with Alana running the show?
I mean, Alana is going to be a forensic anthropologist, and part of me did that so that she would still have a combined interest with her mum, and so that could be another expert built in. And I thought it would be interesting to think about the way she interacts with Alana as an expert over, say, Sonia, because obviously she's really conscious of the fact that she doesn't want to mess up like her daughter's career. So there's been a couple of times where she's been like a bit like, oh, like in book 2, there was a point where she was like, oh, I can't do that because that will impact Alana, and that's a line that she would just never cross. But maybe, I don't know. I think I probably don't know enough about forensic anthropology to do that. Like I would love the idea of like writing like a Patricia Cornwell style book, but I just my technical knowledge is pretty limited, so
it's the benefit of having an amateur sleuth, is that they know as much as I know, and so, I mean, yours must require a lot more research or getting details right, because she is an investigator and she knows, your character knows more than mine does, for example.
So sorry, give me a second, I'm going to edit this bit out. But it's got really dark in my room and I need to turn the light on.
I was just thinking that, I was like, it's in the last minute or two, I'm like, you're getting really dark.
And if I can't edit this bit out, then it's just life. If it turns out my editing skills aren't up to that, then this is just genuinely authentic me. I was just like, it's getting too dark.
It's an intermission. Everyone go get a cup of tea.
I can't actually see me anymore. I need to turn the light on. Sorry. A spin-off. I don't know, actually, with the knowledge that Rowan has, I have enough books that probably make the FBI worried, but they're always like for authors, blood spatter for authors. And I think I watch quite a lot of, not so much true crime, but a lot of like investigatory documentaries. So there's a couple of really good ones in the UK that talk about the forensics of things. And so there are some things that happen, the ideas come directly from programs I've seen where they've like collected blood spatter from a skirting board after it's been painted over, and things I find really fascinating. Or like, I'm quite interested in forensic linguistics, because I think that's just the way in which people say things is really interesting. I would really like to build that more into what I write. But so I think you can get away with a lot of general knowledge without really having to know like it too scientifically.
Yeah. As
Maybe,
long as, yeah, as long as you're not taking the mick. And
yeah,
also, like, readers are here for a good story with the characters. And yeah, I think as long as it's believable and you're not doing really weird things for the sake of the story, which will pull people out of the story.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Rowan has a lot that series has a lot of historic murders, and I think
Mm,
that gives me a bit more leeway with forensics because
yeah.
you can, I suppose, because it's not always an act. I mean, there's been book 3, there's a bit more of an active investigation, and same with book 5, but because a lot of the time there's a lot of historic investigations going on, then it doesn't have to be quite so forensically like aware. It doesn't have to be quite so on the ball forensically. And then sometimes I just like I've got I kind of tap into people that I know, and I'll be like, oh, can you tell me a bit about this? Or so like my daughter, she is she studied biology at university, and so she's really into like she's really interested in insects. And so if I need to do something like insect related, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll just ask her like what would be the thing that I could do that would kind of anchor this point to that. Or like, so I kind of, I suppose, collected a few experts where I
Mm,
check in. My brother, he's retired now, but he was in the police force in England. So was my sister-in-law. She was in the police force in England. So I kind of can go like, could this happen? Like, I know it's like there is a difference between Scots law and English law, so you do have to double check. But even if it's things like arrest procedures, there's going to be a lot of
mm,
similarities, and I can kind
yeah.
of go, where would be my starting point? And obviously, I'm best friends with Google. So yeah,
Obviously.
but it,
It's you talking about having different well, contexts where you can get this kind of information
yeah,
from, and talking about beta reading and differences across boundaries. And it's been quite interesting because I've had some fantastic beta readers, including you from Scotland, a Scottish perspective, English, Irish, American, and Australian. And I think, okay, that's covering quite a bit of the English speaking world to pick up enough of these differences. I can't remember why I was talking about this. Oh, and it's amazing how much you don't know about people necessarily, because someone who in my mind I only knew from writing in the bookish world, and I didn't realize that their day job was working for emergency services dispatch, and I had my character calling emergency services in the book, and then they're able to go, oh yes, this is what would happen, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, this is fantastic. And I mean, what I had was a bit off, and then I was able to change some things. I didn't change it wholeheartedly to the how it would definitely happen, because there I was like, I don't the the bureaucracy of passing this call along is not interesting for the reader, so I'm just going to skip one or two of the steps to get there, so it follows the procedure 90% of the way, but otherwise but it was great to have that feedback from someone who knows exactly what's going on. Another one was I had a character breaking his way out of the back of a police car, and I had based this on a bit of a video that I'd watched of the New Zealand police. They were showing off their new police cars, and because they had a new contract with a new car maker or something, and
wow,
having a bit of a drive around and I was watching this pause play, so I could see the screens and the locks and all this sort of stuff. And then I had someone who was able to basically go and ask a police officer on my behalf, could someone do this if they weren't handcuffed in the back seat? And they said it would be very awkward and difficult, but they could do it. I'm like, great.
I think, like you do discover experts all over the place in little different in really weird different things, and I love that because you then have this kind of collection of people that are going to be great to speak to.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I do kind of collect people who know things, not just because they know things, but because they're also lovely.
Yeah.
But knowing things is quite helpful.
Yeah.
But equally, I think that I've become that on people's lists because the majority of my career has been in high street banking. Like people will say to me, "Oh, could this person get access to this person's account by doing this?" Or can the police just turn up and say, "I need to see these things, and can you do that?" And so I know that for some people, I've kind of become their sort of in like window into that world for them, and that's quite fun to be able to provide that and the things that you don't feel that you're an expert on, but then that it's the little things, like sometimes when I watch crime programs and people do things with banking and I'm like, well, that wouldn't happen. And it's really petty because it's totally irrelevant, and it's the sort of thing I must do with other people's careers all the time. I'm like, well, that wouldn't happen, just simply couldn't do that, or that wouldn't still exist. And it's completely irrelevant, I absolutely know that. I was trying to find out how long it would take recently to get telephone records, and somebody was saying, oh, it's a really laborious thing because you need permission from this person, permission from these people, and I was like, God, that's boring. Like, like that does not help move my story along at all. I'm gonna definitely skip some of those.
But it's great to have the confidence that you know what the process is, and then you can say, okay, I can use most of that, but I don't think anybody's going to give me a gold star for getting all this correct. And I'm like, they just, I think we all just want to move things along, and I mean, as long as we're not, I don't know,
I think as long as you're not like
making too many leaps.
Making too many leaps. So there are things that I'll do, and sometimes I'll have betas going to me, oh, but could that possibly happen? And I'll be like, well, let me just get out my folder of research because that actually could happen, and then this, and then this, and then this. Because if it's something I really feel like I do have a gap in my knowledge, like sibling DNA, or how long where you can get like DNA from, and whether something would work and how long that would stay as a viable sample. I'll have like lots of databases on that. Like I've done my research to make sure that I haven't strayed too far from the kind of like where it would be. And if there's been a couple of times I'd have liked to have used poison. I had intended to use poison, but then I've not, because it's been too tricky, because where would they get the poison, and like what legitimate reason could you have for having this thing? And so like sometimes that's quite fun though, is to kind of find something that you legitimately could have. And then
Angela, you make a very, very good point. And this is one thing that I kind of wish I knew before I committed to the second book, and its title, which is Poison at Penshaw Hall. And so I'm like, again, it's very much a limitation, which is great work, very creative, trying to work within the limitations of this title. And I'm like, oh, poison is hard. And I'm like, it's happening because it's on the title that I've already put up a pre-order.
I think you think of poison because I don't know, like I read a huge amount of Agatha Christie and did a lot of poisoning in Agatha Christie, but it was much easier to poison somebody in the 1930s and 40s than it is now, and even I think probably up to maybe the mid 70s, because there was more poisons in household goods. Like in rat poison had strychnine in it, and like so there was more things that had poison inherently within them that you could kind of get out. Whereas now, because we live in a really health and safety conscious world, like you've got to look a lot harder for your poisons. I feel like you've got to go properly into your botanics for your poisons these days.
I mean, I'm not going to say any more because anything I say on this will give away the entire book. So I feel like I'm giving away enough in the title by having poison in the title. But yes, has definitely been an area that I have had to look into, which I hadn't. I mean, yeah, I had a good idea about where I was going, and so it has worked out as I intended. But I'm like, oh, there's a bit more involved in this than I originally thought.
Do you think you've given yourself an additional task by giving yourself book titles that are Murder at Milverton Square, Poison it, like with the alliteration of like the letter, so like stabbing at Stanley House and that kind of, like are you going to continue on with that theme, do you think?
Yes, I think I will, and it will be some form of death, at or on or in or by, or some little word, and then a location. And I I have the alliteration of the murder on Milton Square and poison at Penshaw Hall, so that's probably going to stick as well. But yeah, it's a limitation, but I think it's fun. You should have seen the number of P related places I tried to go through before I got to one that fitted, that wasn't an existing hall. Because I didn't want anybody to be upset that I was setting a poisoning at their local community hall or something. But yeah, no, it was, yeah. We'll see how long I can keep that format.
So I had funny things to say about like using people like places real names. I have this completely random skill. At least one person of dubious character in every book, I name something and my husband will read it and be like, you can't name them that. I have a client named that. And I have, like it's a business that like, and I'm happy, like, cool, right, I'll just change that then, shall I, completely. And I don't think there's been a book I've written where somebody of dubious character or a business that's been a bit dubious, he hasn't been like, you just can't do that, like you have to change that name. And it's not like I know these people, I don't have his client list that I'm gradually working my way through. It's just really random coincidence that I pick those names as my baddies. So yeah.
I have since made friends with some people who ended up being prominent characters in my book, which is quite hilarious. So I didn't do it on purpose at the time. Oh, mate, I was like, we were talking about it earlier at one point about secondary characters that make more of a splash than you had originally intended. And I had this thought, but I forgot about it. But it was it's just come back to me. And it was that I was setting up in book one, I was introducing the readers to a secondary character with the intention of killing them in the second book. They were going to be my victim. But then, in writing the secondary character, I had so much fun with them in that they were a bit of a challenger to my main character, and I was like, oh, I had too much fun writing the scenes that they're in together, and I'm like, I can't kill that character off. And so then I had to quickly figure out, I had to basically, okay, one of these other secondary characters needs to be my victim, because I wanted to have them at least vaguely introduced before the second book came along. Which is what I've done now. But yeah, that's quite funny. A secondary character that takes on a life of its own. You're like, wow, okay, that took me by surprise. But it's all the fun of the fair.
Oh, so much. We could go on and on and on and on talking. Yes, but I feel like probably we should wrap it up. But why don't you tell everybody who's watching where they can find you, how to subscribe to a newsletter, which they must. I recommend watching you on TikTok because I love your TikToks. So yeah, where can people find you?
The best place where everything is linked is my author website, which is gbralph.com, and that you can get to my newsletter and the various social medias. I was on a very big campaign with TikTok, daily TikToks, but that has fallen by the wayside since I've been doing the second draft of this book. I was like, I need to concentrate. I need to get this finished. So I'm hoping once the second draft is out to beta readers shortly, I need to I enjoy making these TikToks, so hopefully I'll pick them back up again. But anyway, so yeah, my website, gbralph.com, has links to all my social medias and books. Where's mine? This is Murder on Milverton Square. The second one I can't show you because I don't have it printed, but it's on my website. Yes, that's the best place to find me. What about you, Angela? What is your new book called?
My new book is called Lies She Didn't Tell. So yes, so you will, and I don't have a printed copy of it either. I only have my proof copy and I've written all over that. So yeah, Lies She Didn't Tell. And again, probably the best place to find me and everything I'm doing is at my website, which is angelacnurse.com. And you should be able to get links from all my socials to there, but I'm on the majority of social media things as Angela C. Nurse, writer or author, depending on the platform, but it's quite an unusual name, so you probably find me without too much trouble.
Yeah. And when does Lies She Didn't Tell come out?
The 11th of August. You can pre-order on Kindle now, but it'll be on Kindle Unlimited and paperback from the 11th of August. Yes, and if you have been watching this video and you get to the end because you've enjoying our chat as much as we have, I am going to be giving away a signed copy of Jack in a Box to one lucky person. So if you like and comment, then I'll put your name into a hat and put it into an electronic thingamajig and pull out a name, and I will send somebody a signed copy. If you're in the UK, if you're outside the UK, I will send it to you via Amazon, so it won't be signed, but I will send you a copy of Jack in the Box. So yeah.
Same goes for Murder on Milverton Square. If you're interested in doing the same thing as Angela suggested, and I will leave it up to Angela to draw some out of the hat for that. But being in New Zealand, we're a long way away, so it will send a paperback to where you are. Yes. And
well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate chatting with you. It's practically my bedtime, and it's the start of your tomorrow for me. So it's the start of Tuesday for you. Yeah. I'm recording this on Monday night, and I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun. I genuinely could keep talking, but I am conscious of the fact that probably should wrap it up and let you get on with your day. But thanks so much, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I've had a great time.
Yeah, me too.
Cheers, Angela.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye.
See ya.